How can sex with a girl under the age of 18 be unlawful and, in fact, be equivalent to statutory rape, but marriage at the age of 15 be legal? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Today we are looking at a verdict out of the Jharkhand High Court, which has decided, not for the first time by the way, that if a Muslim girl chooses to marry at 15, then her choice has to be upheld. The judge has cited personal law to validate his conclusion. Now remember, child marriages are not the prerogative of any one community. In fact, India has for many years across communities been fighting the propensity to push girls into underage marriage. But when marriages such as these, which are really, we're really talking about children here, are validated by no less than a court, what does it do to our messaging? Remember, all of this is taking place against the backdrop of the cabinet having recommended that the marriageable age of women be raised to 21. In any case, the premium on marriage at a very young age for women distracts them from what they should be really thinking about, I dare say, at that age, careers and economic self reliance. Why is the court validating what is really a misogynistic practice, an archaic tradition from another time in the India of 2022? Why should we use the cloak of diversity to essentially put forth sexist conclusions? Let's introduce our guests on the program today. Joining us is Zakia Soman. Zakia is a women's rights activist who was at the front line of ensuring that triple talaq, that another antediluvian custom, was done away with. Good to see you, Zakia. Also joining us is Ekta Mehta. Ekta Mehta is a lawyer, but she also worked closely with the task force appointed by the government that eventually recommended that the marriageable age of women be raised to 21 from 18. Also joining us on the program is Anuj Tanwir. Anuj is, of course, an advocate and a rights activist who has also worked on the case involving the petition by young Muslim women from Karnataka, their right to wear a hijab to the classroom. And also joining us is Zainab Sikander. Zainab is, of course, a political commentator and a writer. Welcome, everybody. And Zainab, let me start with you. You're a young woman. You're a new mother. Congratulations. Marriage is personal and nobody should tell anybody when to get married, but there is an agreed age of adulthood. I personally think 18 is too young. I personally think that women across communities and across classes are socialized in such a way that at a very young age they're conditioned to think more about marriage than careers. Still today this remains true. When you see a verdict like this in the name of Muslim personal law, how does it make you feel as a young Muslim woman?
I feel very offended, and I also feel it's so unnecessary. I'm a practicing Muslim. I'm very proud of the community that I belong to, but introspection is always something that our religion also recommends. Islam recommends that we think, and we think between what is right and wrong. And as for this particular case, where the Jharkhand High Court has said that the Islamic law allows for a young girl who's attained the age of puberty to get married, I think they're a little bit misinterpreting the law. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not a Muslim cleric, but what I know is that what they are trying to say is they're matching the word puberty with maturity. They're very two different concepts. A 15-year-old girl can, of course, have sex, but does she know how to regulate her emotions? Does she know how to be in a relationship? So, trying to sort of, correlate to completely different concepts of human psychology. They're just finding a loophole to do something which is actually a crime. I mean, what's the point of living in a country where we have the POCSO Act, where we're protecting children, who are minors, to not be harassed sexually or not get into sexual activity. And here the High Court is contradicting that very law by allowing young 15-year-old girls who are Muslims to get married. It just makes no sense to me. And the basis on which they have done this, I personally feel, is completely, it's misrepresenting the religion. It's not saying what is actually said. In fact, in Islam, you can't marry someone till you say Kabul hai thrice in your senses. You're telling me a 15-year-old girl knows what a marriage is? They don't. So the point is, the basic point is that even the cornerstone stone of Islam says choice is the main way to get into a marriage. A 15-year-old girl can't make a choice. That choice is definitely being made by the family. So it stands against Islam and definitely.
In this particular case, just, ironically, it's actually the family that opposed the girl's
Yeah.
decision,
Yeah.
and the judge said it's up to her, it's her choice because that's
Hmm.
what personal says. So I just want to underline that it can work both ways. Sometimes a teenage girl can think mujhe ye karna hai, and a family is saying mat karo, and at other times you can actually have the exact opposite, as you mentioned, Zainab, that you can have families pushing their girls into marriages that they don't want to be part of. What concerns me is what is the age of consent. On the one hand, we want to say, pretend that teenagers are not sexually experimenting. I'm not saying they're old enough, even at 15, to have an informed understanding of whether they want to have sexual relations. But ek taraf, we say that is actually, a sexual offense. And on the other hand, we have the kind of judgment that's come from Jharkhand. I should reiterate that these interpretations have come from courts in the past as well. But on the other hand, Anas, as you will know, the Kerala High Court had a very different reading of this. The Kerala court actually argued that Muslim girls cannot be excluded from within the ambit of POCSO, that if there's a minor Muslim girl and she's in a marriage with somebody, it will be treated as a sexual offense, as an underage relationship. Anas, how do you see what Jharkhand High Court has decided today?
See, first of all, we need to understand what this case was about. This was at the stage of quashing of the FIR. There was an FIR that was registered, that was filed by the family of the girl. The girl ran away on her own accord with the boy, got married. Then the family fell into line. The family said, "All right, there is no point in now disturbing the status quo." They filed an affidavit before the court. Court, on the basis of that affidavit, allowed them to stay together. Said that because under Muslim personal law it is allowed, you can stay together. Now there are two aspects on which we must evaluate this judgment. One is on the point of law, and the other is the societal implication. On point of law, what this judgment does is that it strikes a balance, a very fine balance, because the constitution does allow for communities to be governed by the personal laws in matters of birth, death, inheritance, and marriage. Now, there are also laws that ban child marriage. There are also laws that criminalize sexual activity with a minor. However, the court always, every court, matter of fact, always attempts to strike a balance. Now, in this particular facts of the case, what the court did was perhaps not the worst thing that they did, if I see it only from the aspect of the judge, of the court, and what the court was
But can I
trying to
ask
do.
you something? But can I ask you something? Okay,
Allow me to
okay,
complete just a moment.
okay.
As far as societal implication is concerned, child marriages are not desirable. They are to be condemned. They are horrible. I mean, they are among the worst things that can happen. But they are a reality. There is a data that is showing that in India there are 223 million child brides, out of which 102 millions were married before 15. And it is not limited to Muslims. As per India's spend data, 11% Muslims, 84% Hindus, and
Yeah.
and then the rest of the communities.
Now,
So we need to understand this debate in the context of the judge, of the facts of the case, as well as what the court was trying to do.
can I now respond to that? Of
Yes.
course, I personally have spent years reporting actually child marriages in Rajasthan, where during the time of Tej, you actually have underage Hindu girls who are pushed into marriages against their will. But Anas, you say the court struck a fine balance. The difference is that marriage today, after the Hindu personal law was reformed and modernized, would be treated as unlawful. What the court has done is legitimized, put a stamp of legitimacy, saying, hey, the personal law in the Muslim faith allows this, right? Now, you're treating personal law as static. You're not locating personal law within the context of the modern age, changing societal mores. Why do you agree with what the court has done? I mean, it is setting a precedent where you're basically saying this is allowed. In this case,
No,
the
no.
family may have been opposed to it, but actually the message you're sending to other families is, आप ये कर सकते हैं, आपको कोई रोक नहीं.
See, please understand, this does not become the law of the land. This is the view of one high court. There are different views of different high court, and one day hopefully Supreme Court will settle the law on this. But it is only limited to, and this judgment will not be widespread or rule over this subject. It is only limited to this particular facts and circumstances of the case. This does not become a law. So we need to understand it in that context. And also, and Barkha, you yourself mentioned this, we need to understand that teenagers are indulging into sexual activities. I mean, I go through Instagram reels and I'm horrified by the kind of reels that teenagers are making. They are sexually loaded. They talk about some very extreme stuff that even I did not have knowledge growing up. The world has changed. The world has changed to a great
But
extent.
you know what? On the one hand, there is hypersexualization. I agree with you, which we want to look away from or we don't want to acknowledge. We continue to treat as unlawful. On the other hand, unless where I depart from you is the court actually doing the right thing. I believe we get always locked in these debates. What does the faith say? What does the faith say in Sabrimala? What does the faith say when it comes to girls marrying at 15? What does the faith say on hijab? What does the faith say on triple talaq? There has to be a set of rights that transcends all faiths. All faiths. This is what I believe as a feminist. I don't know what you think, Zakia. Zakia, go ahead.
Before coming to all faiths, Barkha, let us first focus on the Muslim personal law, which has been reform in the Muslim personal law has been long overdue in our country. And I do not fault with the Jharkhand High Court judgment because they have based their judgment on a certain understanding of the Muslim personal law. And why blame the Jharkhand High Court? Because before this, there have been 2 or 3 Delhi High Court judgments. There have been at least 2 judgments of the Punjab and Haryana High Court, all validating child marriages because the girl in question happened to be Muslim, and all driven by the understanding that in Islam, puberty is the age of marriage. Now, what are the sources that these high courts and all the courts in India rely on before arriving at judgments in Muslim personal law matters? The 2 commonest sources that they rely on, one is Dinsha Mullah and another is Amir Ali. Now, both these texts are at least, if I'm not wrong, at least 100 years old. They are, the interpretations of these 2 gentlemen. They are the interpretations, I'm sorry to say, are highly patriarchal. The interpretations are outdated. The interpretations are harmful and therefore unacceptable. In Islam, puberty was the age of marriage at that time in that context. But Islam also asks us to progress and evolve with the times. So clearly, what was the definition of puberty 1400 years ago cannot prevail today in 2022. And in Islam, a marriage is a social contract. A social contract, by definition, presupposes both the parties entering into the contract need to be of a certain emotional maturity, because marriage is an important social relation. In order to get married and in order to sort of maintain your marriage, you need emotional intelligence, you need social intelligence, you need a certain kind of physical maturity.
But when you say why blame the judge's hands in a way are tied by the text that he or she may be referencing. And it is worth to note that, for example, in Sabrimala, it was the woman judge who actually spoke about, adhering to tradition. What could the judge, are you saying that this change has to come from within the community? That Muslims have to get up and say, you know what, this is not acceptable anymore. This is an archaic, old-fashioned practice.
Barkha, there is a role here for the community as well as for those who are sitting in the government. Just like you have codified Hindu family laws. There's a range of some 8-9 Hindu family laws which are based on Hindu religious texts, which are doing away with every ambiguity when it pertains to marriage, divorce, inheritance, property, guardianship and custody of children, succession, share in property for the married girls, unmarried daughters. All that has been codified in the form of these 7-8 Muslim Hindu family laws, which are very much based on the Hindu religious text, but are also reformed in consonance with the constitutional principles of gender justice and gender equality. Muslims of India have been denied the benefit of codified Muslim family laws. Can you believe that we are still governed by an archaic 1937 law called the Sharia Application Act? This all that this law does is just states that Muslims of India will be governed by the Sharia. It doesn't go any further to say what will be the age of marriage, what will be the procedure of divorce, what about polygamy, what about succession, what about guardianship and custody of children. Not only that, the affirmative provisions which are clearly granted in Islam, such as consent, such as
So,
meher, such as women's share in property, even they have not been codified in the so-called
so
Shariat law.
you would want the government to step in to move towards codifying the Sharia.
We want a codified Muslim family law. We want
Family law. I beg
legal,
your pardon. Not
yeah,
codifying
yeah,
the Sharia. I should correct
yeah,
my choice of words there. A
yeah.
codified family law that just like we have with the Hindu personal laws having been
Yes,
codified and modernized, right?
yes.
I know. I'm sure Anas and Zainab will have things to say about that. But let me bring in Ekta now. For perspective, as I said, Ekta actually worked closely with the government-appointed task force led by Jaya Jaitley that was asked to consider whether the legal age of marriage for women should be raised from 18 to 21. The task force said yes. The cabinet cleared this. This is now with the parliament. I reached out to Jaya Jaitley. Ekta, before I come to you, I just want to read out her statement, which I'm sure will evoke some reactions if we can bring this up. Jaya Jaitley said that this judgment is going in the opposite direction from the hopes of a uniform civil code, and it's a willful stunting of budding women, not far from what the Taliban does. So Ms. Jaitley is drawing an analogy between Muslim girls getting married at 15 and that being accepted as legal, and drawing an analogy between that kind of legitimization taking place under the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. That's a very, very strong statement, and I'm sure there will be responses to it. Ekta, uh, before I open up Jayaji's statement for comment, your task force, what did you discover when you made the suggestion that the marriageable age should be raised to 21? And again, I want to say that we need to start drawing a distinction between sex, sexual activity, sexual experimentation, and marriage. We cannot pretend that these are interchangeable sort of concepts. Ekta, please go ahead. Can we unmute Ekta, please? Ekta, you're muted at your end. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, yeah, am I
Yeah,
audible
go
now?
ahead. Yes,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
So, when this came before the task force, what really was the focus before the task force was first gender equality, which is mandated by the constitution and guaranteed to all citizens. Because it was 18 for girls, the marriageable age, and 21 for boys. So it was, of course, to achieve gender equality that it was proposed that the marriage should be made to 21. And with that, it was, of course, the educational and health aspects of women. Their educational prospects were suffering. Health would suffer because of early pregnancies and taking on responsibilities of motherhood. Now, the task force, uh, it's more addressing a social issue, this increase in the age of marriage. And sometimes legal measures are a first step towards social reform. So mostly it is because of the urban and rural dichotomy. It's basically the urban areas where we find more of child marriages. And to get this gender equality, a lot of youth groups were consulted, their views were taken. And most people supported that, yes, the age of girls should be increased to 21 because it was felt important to give them the educational opportunity, make them employable, make them financial independent, and of course, motherhood, which would come at 21 and post that, which was good for the health of the women because the mortality rates, the maternal mortality rates, the infant mortality rates, all that was considered. And even the various laws we have as of now, that was also considered. You have section 375 of IPC, marital rape, below 18, consent, no consent, it's rape. But under the POCSO Act, a child is considered as a person of 18 years of age, and then it is an aggravated offense. So all these things were considered. And that is why it was proposed to enhance the age to 21. And in fact, hearing my co-panelists now on this judgment of the High Court, I think it's good that the age has been enhanced to 21. However, having said that, now Muslims are governed by their separate personal law, which is an uncodified law. So what the High Court has just done here, it has just applied the law as it stands today for
So how does
Muslims.
this
It is
change? Are we saying? So here's my question. I think all of you seem to be saying that the court didn't have an option. Please correct me if anybody disagrees. That the court did not have an option. This is currently the law. The court couldn't have done anything else. This change either has to come. Zakia suggests the government will have to intervene, parliament rather. I mean, I'm saying government. I mean, there has to be a legal route, as happened. But if you look at triple talaq, Zakia, before I come to Zainab, triple talaq went to parliament later. The Supreme Court read it down first. So the courts can do things, right, Zakia? Zakia, unmute,
Things.
please. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, courts can definitely do things. So for any number of years earlier, we were demanding a codified Muslim family law when there was a UPA government. Then finally, we went to Supreme Court with the triple talaq. Only yesterday, our petition has been admitted calling for abolition of polygamy. So it will have to be piecemeal efforts where Muslim women will keep approaching the Supreme Court, demanding, a pinpointed kind of a legal intervention. But I think it's also high time that the Muslim communities begins to look at the rights given by Allah to the women and to the girls, and stops, giving legitimacy to those patriarchal conservative elements who have consistently posed barriers in the in the path of the women obtaining those rights. So we cannot say that everything in Muslim law as it prevails today is very golden and there is no need for reform.
But
There is first of all, we need to admit that there is a long pending need for reform. Our daughters are suffering, our sisters are suffering, and we cannot come in the way of the rights granted to them by Allah. We need to have that honest admission, Barkha. And since we are citizens in a democracy, the lawmaking authority is with the parliament. So we have to approach the parliament, and we have to demand legal parity with all of the religious communities.
let me paint this scenario here to both Zainab and Anas, and then Ekta can come in. If Parliament were to move at this point a legislation to codify family law for Muslims, Zainab, that the immediate criticism would be that this is one more sort of move towards. I'm just saying the narrative would be one more move towards diminishing Muslim identity, and it would get caught in that maelstrom of politics, Zainab. So who do we look towards for change and reform? And triple talaq is emblematic. It came from the court first, and then it went to parliament. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer here, but I'm not sure that I'm convinced that the court's hands are tied. Zainab.
I agree. The court's hands are not tied. And I have to point out about the triple talaq, because whoever spoke, whichever Muslim woman spoke against the triple talaq bill, it was solely, I mean, I can say this, with a lot of confidence, it was solely because the law criminalized men who engaged in triple talaq, who repeated the words talaq thrice instantly, because the Quran doesn't recommend this. This is not the law. Anybody who has knowledge of the Quran and the laws that have been stated very clearly and vividly in it says clearly that the talaq has to be said in 3 intervals, each of 1 month. And anybody doing it instantly is considered to be a biddat, which is basically an innovation created by mankind, not sent by God. And women who were against the triple talaq bill were simply saying, why have you criminalized a civil suit? So that is what Muslim women were against. They were not against triple talaq being removed, the instant triple talaq being removed. So that should be clarified immediately. Secondly, Zakia ji is constantly talking about reform in Sharia. Again, I would, because I'm on the same page with her, but I'd like to clarify, because yes, this is a problem. Anytime Muslim laws are, hampered with, or the word reform is used, to make them seem more polite, the changes in them, one should realize that Islam's laws are taken out of the Quran and the Hadith, and Hadith are sayings of the Prophet, which his companions then narrated, and they were written in books. One has to understand Quran Sharif is anecdotal. It tells you about how to live through anecdotes. Okay, some laws are very explicitly mentioned in them, especially related to women, because I personally feel Islam was a very, very progressive religion. 1400 years ago, we had property rights for women, and there's an entire chapter, An-Nisa, written on women. So, women are greatly dealt, in the Quran in terms of what are their rights and what are their liberties. So anybody who's interpreting these laws also stand to be corrected, and that is where the word reform should be used. We are not trying to reform the
But
Sharia,
but but
we
but
are not
I
trying to
do.
reform the Quran, we are not trying to reform the Hadith. We are simply
So
saying interpretations of laws that are not mentioned clearly in the Quran and the Hadith can stand to be reformed.
now I have a question, first to Anas and then to Ekta. The point is, this will invariably at some point take us back to the Uniform Civil Code debate. It cannot, but we cannot avoid it. It's the elephant in the room. You have to address the issue. And because Zainab is able to locate her feminism, her fight for gender equity in her understanding of what the Quran says. Zakia Soman says that the courts will refer back to texts that were 100 years old, that were written for a certain context and time, right? How you interpret religious texts, the time at which they were written also changes. My question to you, Anas, is this: are there not some values, not Hindu values, not Muslim values, not Christian values, universal values anywhere in the world that transcend any interpretation of what any religious book says?
Please, I don't even get surprised anymore how every debate turns into a sort of change in Islam and bashing of it. But let
No,
us
where's the
look.
bashing? There's been no bashing at
Let's
all.
look back. No, no,
Zakia,
no, no,
Zakia's trying to say
not
something.
Zainab, not
Zakia,
Zainab,
one
not
minute.
Zainab
Zakia,
at all,
Zakia,
please.
Zakia.
Zainab spoke really well. I
See,
agree with what Zainab
see,
has said.
I'm used to this kind of
No,
distortion
no, no.
coming from
I'll tell you. I'll tell you
Hindutva
how.
panels,
I
as
was
well as
not even
coming
on
from those who
Zakia.
are wrongfully
I was
trying to
not even
defend what is
on
wrong.
Zakia. I was talking about Jaya Jaitley's statement, matter of fact, where she talks about Taliban and all that. I was not even on Zakia. All right, let me speak what I'm trying to speak.
Okay,
Why do you
okay,
presume that I'm attacking
okay,
you?
okay, okay, okay. Go ahead, go ahead,
Huh.
go ahead.
So I
Go ahead.
was on that because from what the Taliban does, you bring Taliban, you bring a certain imagery. 84% is the proportion of Hindus in child marriage under the age of 10. Why would you bring Taliban when it's been a general practice of the majority religion in India? Now, on your point, Barkha,
Yeah.
there cannot be a change in the divine law. Our faith is that what Quran says is final. There can, as Zainab pointed out, there can be different interpretations, and there will be different interpretations because Quran does give you that kind of freedom that it can be interpreted in many ways as per the situation, as per the circumstances, as per the understanding of human beings. And as the understanding evolves, the text will remain same. Now, in bringing back on this to this particular case, please understand this was not the case where the court did not have an option. The court could have gone through the Kerala way. They could have
Yeah.
taken what the view of the Kerala High Court. The judge chose to take this view. The judge is not a Muslim sitting there. All right. So it's nothing to do with the Muslim law. Because there was a resolution between the parties, he did not want to disturb it. So he said, okay, there is one way out of it. That way is a Muslim personal law, which allows for it.
No, but
That's all.
that's a great point by you, that the court, the fact that Kerala completely responded differently, the High Court in Kerala, to in a way a very similar issue, shows you, Ekta.
And the community did not get outraged about that judgment. There was no opposition to that judgment.
Okay.
So the judge could have taken a different view. It's just that he had an option and he chose to go this way, and rightly so. Because, see, understand, every religion in the world puts value on matrimony. Every single religion sort in a way or other prohibits sexual relationship out of marriage, pre or extramarital.
But all of these
That
are
is not
changing
something
social
novel in
values.
Islam.
Anas, even now, adultery has been decriminalized. There are many things that are shifting. We have a petition in the court today talking about a same-sex marriage. We had many religious clerics. Actually, the reading down of 377, which decriminalized homosexuality, is a very important example in this context, because you once again had the court setting the template for change. It didn't actually come from Parliament. We often look towards our court to set the change, right? So I just want to bring in Ekta briefly, and then I'll come to all of you for last comments. Ekta. Therefore, I think Anas points out, I pointed this out, the Kerala High Court took a very different approach. The courts can respond in a different way. But when Anas says that a divine law cannot actually be reformed or cannot actually be changed, it can be interpreted differently, perhaps. What does that do to the rights of women that may be considered universal?
See, this is a different case, honestly, because here the father, who was a party in the case, he accepted the marriage. The girl accepted the marriage. They gave their affidavits, and perhaps the matter was closed there. So there was no point in the judge going over and beyond that and questioning the marriage, questioning her age of 15 years, etc., etc. So that is why he has taken the position that, okay, as per the personal law which applies to the parties, there is nothing illegal about it. There was clear consent of all the parties there. And Muslim personal law also, I think, gives equal emphasis on consent. It does say that a marriage is void where there is no consent. So it assumes majority, or a marriageable age when once the girl reaches puberty. It assumes that that's how the law is. It even so far
I
as
know,
adoptions.
puberty is 13, by the way. I just for everybody's context, puberty is 13. I mean, I don't think I could tell my arm from my elbow at the age of 13. I don't know that a 15-year-old's belief that she's making a choice is actually choice. And by the way, before any of you say it, I also feel that about whether consent for sexual relations, whether you're old enough at that point to really understand it being informed consent. But Ekta, I take your point that the judge was faced with a very different kind of situation. He wasn't actually being asked to arbitrate on the principle or the concept of underage marriage. And I take that point. Zainab, very quickly, if I can bring you in, you say that there is an anecdotal sort of telling of values. What happens when values change?
Uh, that's a beautiful question, actually. The thing is, the way I look at Islam and the way I practice it, the religion is very nuanced. And you have to sort of, look at it more spiritually than, something that has been chiseled on stone, and, we have to follow it very rigidly. I personally feel Islam is a very flexible religion. So, in my opinion, values also come from how the society is developing, intellectually. This is where I always say the community needs to introspect. So if I am a young mom of a girl, I will tell my daughter to, marry at an age where she's ready, where she has an emotional intelligence, to carry on a relationship with another man. And this is where the community needs to develop. The problem is actually Muslims are targeted so much around the world, and incidents like these are picked up to perpetuate Islamophobia. So, what's happening with the Muslim psyche is that to just sort of safeguard our own identity, we become very rigid in our approach to the religion and to the laws that are being made, interpreted from the religion. That is where the Muslim community needs to introspect and see that how we have to evolve with society while keeping our religion. And I think in my personal opinion, Jews have done that beautifully. They still adhere to the letter of their Torah, but at the same time they've evolved very well. I think that change is yet to come in Muslim society all over the world. You probably see it in countries like Jordan and Lebanon, but in India, because there's a huge Islamophobia problem, to sort of mark our identity and, to show that we are courageous, in the face of Islamophobia, we try and become even more conservative. We try and follow the letter almost to a point where we seem like we are all sitting in a black box and we are happy to be there. But that's not the truth. Muslims are looking to evolve.
Well, in this tussle, it is the women, as
Yes.
always, like in all communities, the women who suffer the most in a way. And I want to take this to Zakia. This is a big age-old debate. Does change have to be organic? Does change have to be societal? Does legal template provide a beacon of hope and a kind of guiding light? And I think the decriminalizing of homosexuality is a very interesting example where religious leaders across faiths actually took a much more conservative position, that the court just said, too bad, this is what we've decided. And I really won't be surprised if from this Supreme Court you actually have a same-sex marriage legislation, and then you'll have everybody up in arms debating it. Zakia, last word to you.
So, Barkha, I'm so glad you brought up the universal values. So, the fundamental values of Islam are justice, kindness, compassion, and wisdom. So we need to measure every action of a Muslim, whether it it is how correct it is on the measure of these values. So Islam is not a rocket science. I'm afraid it has been made into one deliberately to preserve the orthodox status quo and to preserve the power of some men of religion over society and particularly over women. So any practice, any tradition which does not satisfy the requirements of these values, which are the fundamental values: justice, kindness, compassion, and wisdom, cannot be Islamic values. And I'm afraid, this problem of lack of justice to women predates in India. It predates 2014, and world over, in all over wherever there are Muslim societies, it predates 9/11. So there has to be some kind of admission in Muslim societies world over, barring certain North African countries, barring Morocco and Tunisia, and to an extent Indonesia. This is the framework, this is the mindset in each and every Muslim society world over. So Muslims need to introspect, I agree with that. And we need to, we need to have a very easy relationship with our religion, because we don't have to be always operating out of fear. Out of fear of Allah, fear of burning in jail.
I think that's
Because
similar
Allah
to-
is not such a draconian creature as most Muslims make him or her out to be. Allah is quite a loving creature. Depends on who is approaching Allah and in which manner. So I think for today I'll leave it here.
So we leave it there as well. Anas, Ekta, Zainab, and Zakia. It is a conversation, of course, when it comes to personal law and family law, secular family law versus personal laws. This, by the way, applies in different ways to different religious communities. Most groups who are petitioning the court today are women's groups. Whether it's a Parsi woman who's asking for the rights, for example, to be able to cremate her dead. There are many levels. There's the Bohris who are talking about genital cutting. There's so many things to unpack here, and I always say orthodoxies of all communities militate against women. This is not about one faith versus versus another. We leave it there. Thank you very much to our panel. Coming up in a few moments from now, Arvind Kejriwal, the Delhi Chief Minister, is live with us in exactly 15 minutes. But in the meantime, thank you to our panel and see you soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.